Hello, everyone. My name's Eloisa Ramos, and I'm here with my daughter, Sonia. Hi, Sonia. So we are continuing with the study of the text of A Course in Miracles, and we left off with chapter 19. We're starting section 3. Let's see, chapter 19, the attainment of peace. And we are, it says 2, but it's really 3. I think this is just a typo here. The unreality of sin. And we finished sin versus error. So I think it's a continuation of what we were discussing last time. Okay, paragraph 1. The attraction of guilt is found in sin, not error. Sin will be repeated because of this attraction. Fear can become so acute that the sin is denied the acting out. But while the guilt remains attractive, the mind will suffer and not let go of the idea of sin. For guilt still calls to it, and the mind hears it and yearns for it, making itself a willing captive to its sick appeal. Sin is an idea of evil that cannot be corrected and yet will be forever desirable. As an essential part of what the ego thinks you are, you will always want it, and only an avenger with a mind unlike your own could stamp it out through fear. Okay. Okay, so there's a whole section on the attraction of guilt. I don't think we've studied that yet, but what this is saying is that the attraction of guilt is really coming from the idea of sin. Okay, so if we can, release the idea of sin, then the attraction will also be released to guilt. Because the healing of the mind is a correction for what the mind thinks it is, what we believe we are, okay? And because we bought into the idea of separation and being a body, we identify with the ego thought system. And the ego thought system says that sin is real because evil exists. And the idea of evil is that it's an opposite to eternal love, basically, to God. So it's a belief that eternal God or eternal love can be attacked, and that's what sin is. So it's tied to the idea of evil. And because it's considered not an error, then it's believed to be without correction. And that's why line 6 says that sin is an idea of evil that cannot be corrected and yet will be forever desirable, because the ego thought system starts with a premise and the assumption that the separation happened. And if the separation happened, then that makes the idea of attack on God reality to the mind that believes that. Hence, the idea that we are sinful and that have attacked God. So, yeah, it's an essential part of what the ego thinks you are, and you will always want it. So as long as we believe that we are sinners, that we are let's see, that we have the power to attack or separate from or usurp the power of God, or change how God created us. All of those are basically the same thing. It's the idea of sin. So let's see. I'm not sure about line 8, and only an avenger with a mind unlike your own could stamp it out through fear. Yeah, but all of this, of course, is tied to suffering. So ultimately, the healing of the mind is a is the release of suffering, and um, that to me is way more attractive than the idea of guilt, because guilt brings suffering. But we haven't made that connection. When we make the connection that suffering comes from holding on to guilt, we're more motivated to really look at that and work with the Holy Spirit, look at it with the Holy Spirit to release it, so that we are not deserving of punishment, see, and undeserving of love. That's what sickness is. It's suffering. Okay. Okay. Any questions on you?
Yeah, actually, I have
Uh-huh.
a lot of questions. I don't think I really understood like half of this. Like, um, I don't understand what line 3 is saying. Like, is there an example of that? Like, you can maybe give fear can become so acute that the
Yeah.
sin is denied the acting out.
Yeah. So we deny. So in other words, okay. So what it's saying is that the attraction of guilt is found in sin. Okay. And if if there's an attraction to sin, then sin will be repeated because of this attraction. So you can think of, what would be a common sin? Well, it could be maybe I don't know. There's a lot of stuff around, sexual stuff. So it could be like, I don't know, just say it's pornography. So to a lot of religions, pornography is a sin. Okay. And it becomes addictive because it is repeated because of the attraction of guilt. Okay. And however, when you hold on to guilt, there's a lot of fear because you believe that you have actually attacked God. And now you're really terrified of God punishing you. So that's when the fear can become so acute. You can be afraid that, you can become paranoid and believe that God's coming to kill you, or you can, uh, because you feel so guilty and because it's a sin, you believe it's a sin. Sin is deserving of punishment. That's part of the idea of sin. So, so the fear can be so acute that the sin is denied the acting out. So what's and a lot of this is mental illness, because the sin can be so, I mean, the guilt can be so acute that the fear uh, dissociates the person, so that um, they will never admit that they ever watch pornography. Okay. Because just admitting it is having to look at that acute fear that uh, that they're not looking at. So you have to repeat sin, you have to kind of dissociate yourself um, from what you're doing, almost like putting yourself in a trance so that you are almost unconsciously doing it to the point where sometimes people don't even remember. So, like people passing out, they go unconscious and then they wake up and they don't remember what the heck they did. So maybe someone goes out at night and parties a lot, and who knows, maybe they have premarital sex, and that's a sin in the Catholic Church, okay? And they drink too much and they pass out. In the morning, they remember nothing of what they did. So it's a defense mechanism that would basically um, split the mind so that you no longer remember what you did last night. Okay, does that help, Sonia?
Sort of. So you would say that like going unconscious or passing out would be the
The defense.
denial of acting out?
It's the defense because then you literally cannot remember, which is a denial, or you simply just lie about it.
Okay, so lying would be the
Yeah,
denial of
yeah,
acting.
yeah. And once you lie about it, what ends up happening is that you you repress it. And when you repress it, it becomes so intolerable that you end up projecting it. So a lot of times you can kind of see when a person is feeling really guilty and they're attacking someone that's innocent for whatever sin they think the other person is making, it's because they're really doing the same thing themselves, but they're putting it on somebody else. They're projecting it and seeing it in somebody else. So that's a denial of the acting out. There's a lot of very, what's the word? Fervent people that will go after quote unquote others for committing sins, but it's really because they're hiding their own. It's really the same thing. Yeah. I mean, in the Catholic Church, homosexuality is a sin. Okay. So you may have someone who is really anti-gays, anti-lesbian, and they themselves have, engaged in sex with someone their own, gender. Or maybe they're attracted to someone their own gender, but they're denying all of that within themselves, seeing it in somebody else and feeling threatened. So they have to go out and attack them. Does that make sense?
Yes, but my question is, isn't it implied like within the definition or context of doing something sinful that you wouldn't want to like tell that to anyone or display it anyway? So how is that
Well,
a denial?
no, because between, for example, let's say, teenage boys, okay, if they're Catholic, okay, there's a lot of peer pressure to, have sex with girls, okay, but it's sinful. So in their family, they may deny any sexual activity, but with their friends, they're going to really be
Oh,
boasting
okay.
about it. Yeah,
Okay. That answers my question.
yeah,
Okay, thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Okay, so yes, because sin is elevated. That's why the guilt becomes so attractive, you see, because quote unquote, doing it is a big deal, and the other teenagers look up to you or whatever. They think you're cool or whatever because girls, will, have sex with you or whatever. Um, so they have the association of guilt to being popular or being seen as uh, attractive, or so the guilt is associated with position, rank, and status in a, in their peer group. Hence, the attraction to guilt, and therefore to the repetition of sin, which is, well, I'm just going to keep sleeping with girls because it gets me all this attention from my friends and all this popularity or whatever. Yeah. Okay, number 2.
The ego does not think it possible that love, not fear, is really called upon by sin and always answers. For the ego brings sin to fear, demanding punishment. Yet punishment is but another form of guilt's protection. For what is deserving punishment must have been really done. Punishment is always the great preserver of sin, treating it with respect and honoring its enormity. What must be punished must be true, and what is true must be eternal and will be repeated endlessly. For what you think is real, you want and will not let it go.
Yeah, so sin is really hard to let go precisely because of what it's saying here. We really think that it's real. And the proof is the punishment. Okay, so if my parents punish me because let's see. Okay, because I stole something. I don't know. Okay. I'm, say I'm just, a teenager or in junior high or whatever, and my friends, go after school and they whatever, and I don't have money and I decide to steal something and I get caught, and then, you know, uh, my parents find out, and then I am punished for it. So if I'm punished for it, then I must be guilty. And if I must be guilty, I must have accomplished that sin. So that sin must be real. Um, and and so it's uh, and therefore sin is going to be associated with fear. For the ego brings sin to fear, demanding punishment. Okay. So sin has to demand punishment because if it doesn't get punished, okay, well, is it a sin then? Okay, so that's why forgiveness, okay, is the idea that what my brother that let's see that I'm forgiving my brother for what they did not do. Okay, it's not for what they did. So it's not for sin. I'm not forgiving them for the sin that they did. I'm forgiving them for what they did that is not a sin. Um, it's an error. Okay, so okay, so there's no punishment. Now here's the thing though. The attraction to guilt and therefore to sin is such that um, you can misinterpret forgiveness to say, oh, okay, well, they forgave me. Okay, so they didn't punish me. Okay, so I got away with it. Okay, meaning that people believe that that somehow I am special sinner, a special sinner because I didn't get punished for my sin. Okay, so they can completely turn around and misinterpret forgiveness to hold on to the idea of sin and make themselves special. Okay, so so yeah, it's really tricky. Letting go of the idea of sin is really tricky. So, um, but of course, Holy Spirit says that what sin is really calling for is love. So that's why the Course teaches that whenever there's a quote unquote attack, it's really a call for love. Okay, because because there's no sin, it's just error. Um, because the idea of sin is not true to the mind that recognizes that the separation never happened and that the self that God created is still as God created it, which is loving, just like its creator, um, and uh, and eternal. So that love cannot be changed. Okay, so the belief in separation implies change, and it implies guilt, implies sin, implies fear. It implies a lot of things. So okay. Anything else? No, no. So that's the thing with the great preserver of sin is punishment. And so if we believe in punishment, if we believe in quote unquote justified attack, okay, we're going to be preserving the idea of sin. That's why the Course teaches that attack is never justified, because there's no sin in truth. So hence, punishment is never justified, because it's a call for correction or a call for love. Okay, number 3. So an error, on the other hand, is not attractive. What you see clearly as a mistake, you want corrected. Sometimes a sin can be repeated over and over with obviously distressing results, but without the loss of its appeal. And suddenly you change its status from a sin to a mistake. Now you will not repeat it. You will merely stop and let it go, unless the guilt remains. For then you will but change the form of sin, granting that it was an error, but keeping it uncorrectable. This is not really a change in your perception, but it is sin that calls for punishment, not error. Okay, in order to really, let's see, heal the mind, we have to get down to the guilt and release the guilt, because even if we can see that the sin is an error, uh, let's see, you will not repeat it. You will stop and let it go. Okay, but unless the guilt remains. Because if the guilt remains, then you will but change the form of the sin. You can kind of see this with addiction sometimes, you know, because, for example, people can look at smoking as a sin. Um, and maybe they realize, okay, well, it's a mistake. But then, so they stop smoking, but then they pick up a different kind of addiction, there. So that is still a sin. Um, so the idea of sin still remains. So this is not really a change in your perception. Yeah, because the sin is still calling for punishment, not the error. Okay. Okay, number 4, Sonia.
Holy Spirit cannot punish sin. Mistakes he recognizes and would correct them all as God entrusted him to do. But sin, let me read from here. Let me redo that. The Holy Spirit cannot punish sin. Mistakes he recognizes and would correct them all as God entrusted him to do. But sin he knows not, nor can he recognize mistakes that cannot be corrected. For a mistake that cannot be corrected is meaningless to him. Mistakes are for correction, and they call for nothing else. What calls for punishment must call for nothing. Every mistake must be a call for love. What, then, is sin? What could it be but a mistake you would keep hidden? A call for help that you would keep unheard and thus unanswered?
Yeah, and if we keep it unanswered because we've hidden it, okay, and we're not willing to look at it, then it remains unhealed, basically. Uh, and then it's going to show up at some form of sickness, because the sickness is in the mind, but holding on to it ends up projecting projecting it, and it'll show up in some form of sickness in the body, or emotional instability, or whatever it is, because of the projection. So anything that we hide from ourselves is repressed and then unconsciously gets projected. So um, and it's all fear. It's all fear. So you want to release fear anytime that it shows up, because it means that there's something that we're hiding there that we're not, willing to look at. And it's just a call for love. So no, there's no judgment involved. It's just a matter of not being afraid to look at the error, at the mistake, so that we stop hiding it. And usually we hide it because of the fear of sin. So if you grow up and your your parents maybe punished you whenever you made a mistake, okay, maybe whatever it was, then you're going to have fear associated with mistakes, because there was punishment. And and because of that fear, you're going to want to hide them, because you're actually perceiving the mistake as a sin that's deserving of punishment. So anytime there's fear over a mistake, then we're misinterpreting what we did as a sin rather than just an error that can be corrected. If there's fear of punishment, it automatically, a lot of times people will say, well, I don't even know what sin is. Well, anytime there's fear of punishment, you're making what you did or said or whatever a sin. Yeah. Okay, number 5. In time, the Holy Spirit clearly sees the Son of God can make mistakes. On this, you share his vision. Yet you do not share his recognition of the difference between time and eternity. And when correction is completed, time is eternity. The Holy Spirit can teach you how to look on time differently and see beyond it, but not while you believe in sin. In error, yes, for this can be corrected by the mind. But sin is the belief that your perception is unchangeable, and that the mind must accept as true what it is told through it. But if it does not obey, the mind is judged insane. The only power that could change perception is thus kept impotent, held to the body by the fear of changed perception, which its teacher, who is one with it, would bring. Okay. So this is explaining how we block the Holy Spirit guidance and healing. Okay, so the purpose of time for the Holy Spirit is really just for correction, for healing of the mind. And when that correction is complete, the mind is healed, and therefore there is no more time, because the mind recognizes that there was never a separation. Hence, there was never time. Eternity never changed. Okay. So the whole idea of time was a dream, and the mind awakens to the truth of eternity. So the Holy Spirit can teach you how to look on time differently, okay, and see beyond it. Okay, so the little willingness that the Holy Spirit needs from us is to let go of the belief in sin. Okay, because remember, the Holy Spirit cannot see sin, so it can't undo sin for us. The Holy Spirit can release and heal error. But if we want to hold on to the belief in sin, then what we're doing is we're protecting the error and not allowing, or we're blocking the light, which is the Holy Spirit, that would release the darkness. Yes, so the mind which makes the error can correct the error. Okay, but sin is the belief that your perception is unchangeable. Okay, and remember that the miracle is a change in perception. So the belief in sin blocks the miracle. Okay, not because it really has power to block the miracle, but it blocks the awareness of the miracle, because miracles are seen in light. And the mind that believes in sin is not seeing in light, it's seeing in darkness. So it cannot be aware of the miracle. Okay, so sin is a belief that your perception is unchangeable and that the mind must accept as true what it is told through it. Hence, the mind is not self-aware, is not questioning its own ego thought system, because it's not supposed to do that. Okay, it's supposed to accept as true what the ego's thought system says through it. It's by default, it's supposed to do that. And that's why 8 says, if it does not obey and begins to question or to, um, or to start, what's the word? Well, yeah, having doubts about whether that is really in its best interest, the mind is judged insane. So it's a little bit like, it's a little bit like when I was in college, I, I was a senior and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after I graduated. So I ended up, I decided, oh, well, I'll apply to the business school, graduate business school, and apply to law school and then see what happens. But I remember telling my friend, remember that if I just remind me that if I actually get accepted, that I really don't want to go. Okay. Okay. Oh, so why am I applying? Well, because I'm not supposed to question the idea that, you're supposed to climb the ladder of success. And if you're capable, then you can't disobey the path that you're on. It's kind of what it's saying here. That, you're not supposed to not want success in the world, okay? Even though you really don't want it. Why are you laughing, Sonia? Can you relate to
Because
that?
that's exactly what's happening to me right now. Because it's I have at work there's someone who's in the process of trying to get promoted. And so far the track record is everyone in my position has climbed up the ladder, but I see the ladder so closely and I like I know like deep down that that's not meant for me, but everyone else wants that for me, maybe. It's kind of, yeah. So I'm like, so it's going against everything that, oh no, you'll get paid more, there's more success,
Yeah.
but
Well, yeah,
it,
it's going against to everything that they believe.
yes.
Yes.
But I love that for the person I know. I love that for them. They're gonna do great if they do go that route. So just not for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
the same
And
thing.
so and so the collective around you would judge you insane. Okay, because you're not obeying the collective valuing, okay, of what you're supposed to do with your life in the world. Okay, as if that was actually life. Okay. Uh, so yes. And so that just keeps us unaware of the what nine says of the actual power that we have within us that could change perception. Um, so it's a way to protect us from being guided by the Holy Spirit, which is teacher with a capital T. You see. Um, okay. Okay, number 6.
When you are tempted to believe that sin is real, remember this. If sin is real, both God and you are not. If creation is extension, the Creator must have extended himself, and it is impossible that what is part of him is totally unlike the rest. If sin is real, God must be at war with himself. He must be split and torn between good and evil, partly sane and partially insane. For he must have created what wills to destroy him and has the power to do so. Is it not easier to believe that you have been mistaken than to believe in this?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't believe it, uh, if we could just really look at this and say, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, so I mean, that would be what insanity is. Okay, because we're not really anything. Okay, line 4, he must be split and torn between good and evil, partly sane and partly insane. Well, what the heck is that? What are you? You're not sane, you're not insane. So so that's why it says that if sin is real, then both God and you are not. Because contradiction is not saying anything. Okay. So there's no communication there. And remember that love is communication. Creation is communication because it's extension. So if we're not communicating, if we're not saying anything, then we would be unreal. All contradiction is basically meaningless because there's nothing you can conclude from contradiction, which is duality. Um, the idea that God would have created what wills to destroy him and has the power to do so. I mean, then what God would have created would have been something greater than God, which would be inequality, which would be not the same. It would be unlike itself. So, and I mean, and that's really unheard of, right? Um, even in the physical world, because it's a like for like. You have lemon tree gives lemons. You don't have the lemon tree giving you pineapples. So yeah. Um, yeah, so it implies separation, obviously. Line 3, if sin is real, God must be at war with himself. So there must be more than one God, or he must be split. He would have to be split because how could he battle himself? Okay, so then he would not be complete. He would not be whole. He could not be eternal. I mean, it completely undoes the idea of God. Mm. So, okay, number 7. While you believe that your reality or your brother's is bounded by a body, you will believe in sin. While you believe that bodies can unite, you will find guilt attractive and believe that sin is precious. For the belief that bodies limit mind leads to a perception of the world in which the proof of separation seems to be everywhere. And God and his creation seem to be split apart and overthrown. For sin would prove what God created holy could not prevail against it, nor remain itself before the power of sin. Sin is perceived as mightier than God, before which God himself must bow and offer his creation to its conqueror. Is this humility or madness? Yeah. Well, it's definitely madness, but we're not very clear sometimes about what madness is because everything is upside down. So we can't really, the mind can't even discern the difference between sanity and insanity, so, a lot of the time, because it's so confused. Um, yes, and of course, you know, there would be very few people that would not believe, okay, that the reality of your brother is bounded by a body, okay, because that's that's a major, major teaching of a lot of religions. I mean, the Catholic Church teaches that the body is the holy temple. So, um, that the soul lives in the body. Hence, that the body, that you as a soul, a spirit, reality, is bounded by a wall, which is physical. That's a body. Um, and so that in itself will be a belief in sin because the body is not eternal. So to believe that we're a body means we are not as God created us. So we've changed how God created us. And then to believe that bodies can unite when the whole idea of a body is that it's an individual, it's separate, and it's on its own, each body. So how can they unite? Um, but okay, so the idea uh, of of a body having sex with a body is what most people consider uniting, or they consider that oneness. Um, and and in that case, you will find guilt attractive and believe that sin is precious. Because it's a belief that sexual intercourse is a body uniting. So it's an undoing of separation, even though there's still separation, which is a contradiction. So, um, yeah, for the belief that bodies limit mind leads to the perception of the world, yeah, in which the proof of separation seems to be everywhere. Because the physical world seems to be things, objects, bodies that are separate and individual and that, interact as separate entities. And and hence the belief is that the body has a mind of its own, so that um, the mind is basically at the mercy of the body's physical abilities, so that the mind can be limited by the body's abilities. If you lose your ability to see or to walk or to whatever, then you believe that, too bad for the mind because it depends on the body. And that's completely upside down. So because the body takes instructions from the mind. So it's really the body that's limited by the mind, by the beliefs of the mind. So yeah. And so, I mean, yeah, sin would prove that God created holy, that God created holy could not prevail against it, nor for sin would prove that God created holy, that what God created holy could not prevail against it, nor remain itself before the power of sin. So that's the main thing about sin, is that it's the belief that it has changed what God created. And hence it has greater power, that it is mightier than God. Um, yeah. Okay. So number 8.
If sin is real, it must forever be beyond the hope of healing. For there would be a power beyond God's capable of making another will that could attack his will and overcome it, and give his son a will apart from his and stronger. And each part of God's fragmented creation would have a different will, opposed to his, and in eternal opposition to him and to each other. Your holy relationship has, as its purpose now, the goal of proving this is impossible. Heaven has smiled upon it, and the belief in sin has been uprooted in its smile of love. You see it still because you do not realize that its foundation has gone. Its source has been removed, and so it can be cherished but a little while before it vanishes. Only the habit of looking for it still remains.
That's talking about how the tiny mad idea, the ego thought system arose, and the answer was given instantly. So it only lasted but for a little while. And so without the ego thought system, there is no sin. And so the what remains is really just like let's see, what you see, the foundation is gone, number 6. So you see it still because you do not realize that its foundation has gone. So it's like a past memory. Uh, what, let's see. It's like a residue, okay, that remains, but its source is not there anymore. The cause of it is the root of it is not there. So it's a little bit like a bouquet of flowers, okay? They last but for a little while. You can smell them, and then without their root, they don't last because their foundation, their root is gone. And so we cherish them but for a little while um, before they're vanished, and they got to go back in the compost bin, back to the garden. Um, so that's the idea of sin. It's only the habit of looking for it that still remains. It's not really there. The whole ego thought system is not really there anymore. But it's a past memory that keeps us believing it's still there because it's an illusion. It's like a hallucination. Okay, number 9. And yet you took with And yet you look with heaven's smile upon your lips and heaven's blessings on your sight. You will not see sin long. For in the new perception, the mind corrects it when it seems to be seen and it becomes invisible. Errors are quickly recognized and quickly given to correction to be healed, not hidden. You will be healed of sin and all its ravages the instant that you give it no power over your brother. And you will help him overcome mistakes by joyously releasing him from the belief in sin. Okay, so number 5 is you will be healed of sin and all its ravages the instant you give it no power over your brother. And how do we do that? Well, we practice forgiveness. Okay. So by practicing forgiveness, we are saying, okay, I am reminded now that whatever I think my brother did, he didn't really do that. Okay. And it's a call for love. So it has no power to attack. The mind cannot attack. So my brother has not lost his innocence. It's a misperception. Um, and that's how you help him overcome mistakes, by joyously releasing him from the belief in sin through forgiveness. Okay, okay, number 10.
Actually, just real quick, that reminds me every time I'm driving, like on the road, um, I I always have to remember this when I like see cars like cut me off or like do, like quote unquote acts like are not following the rules of the road like at all. So it's actually really helpful because in those instances, I always go back to, oh no, I've probably done that before, or I've done the
Yeah.
same thing. I wouldn't want someone to
Condemn
uh
me.
condemn me for it, and they don't, because I actually did do something like that recently. And then after I had to, nobody honked, nobody did anything. It was fine. It was perfectly fine, even though I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, just thinking about that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. So that's the power of the mind to release and heal what you just demonstrated there through the power of forgiveness. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm. So in the holy instant, you will see the smile of heaven shining on both you and your brother, and you will shine upon him in glad acknowledgement of the grace that has been given you. For sin will not prevail against a union heaven has smiled upon. Your perception was healed in the holy instant heaven gave you. Forget what you have seen and raise your eyes in faith to what you now can see. The barriers to heaven will disappear before your holy sight, for you who were sightless have been given vision and you can see. Look not for what has been removed, but for the glory that has been restored for you to see. Okay, so the practice of forgiveness, in the let's see, in the long run, um, enables the mind to recognize the real world, okay, as loving. And so the body's eyes are no longer used because they're basically sightless. They only see what are conditioned to see. But Holy Spirit vision sees beyond the body and beyond what the body, quote unquote, does, okay, beyond the error. And that's why it heals the error, because it remembers the truth of our creation as completely innocent. Um, yeah, and that's the glory. That's the look not for what has been removed, which is basically the belief in sin, but for the glory that has been restored for you to see, which is the perfection of God's creation as oneness. So there's no separation. Okay. So, okay, 11. Look upon your Redeemer and behold what he would show you in your brother, and let not sin arise again to blind your eyes. For sin would keep you separate from him, but your Redeemer would have you look upon your brother as yourself. Your relationship is now a temple of healing, a place where all the weary ones can come and rest. Here is the rest that waits for all after the journey, and it is brought nearer to all by your relationship. Okay. Um, yeah. So I like number 3 here because it says that it's our relationship that is now a temple of healing, because that's how we practice the forgiveness. And that's how we also recognize um, that giving is receiving, because it's just one self. It's the same self. So so there's no, let's see. So there's no attraction to guilt okay, because there's no, because you don't, because there's no sin, there's no way to get away with anything. What you give, you receive. Um, and and so there's no inequality there. Um, okay. So anything, Sonia, before we stop? No? Okay. Okay. Well, that's the conclusion here, the unreality of sin. Okay, that was a really good section. And we will then see you next time for the obstacles to peace. And remember that peace is health. So, um, so the belief in sin is going to bring conflict, which is why it's sickness. Um, and that's what separation is too. It's conflict. So it's also it's it's the undoing of sickness by releasing the ego thought system, which is based on fear. So healing is a release of fear. And that's what we're practicing with forgiveness. Okay, so that's it. Until next time, thank you and bye.